Hey everybody! Welcome to another speed paint with Maximum Panic. Or, as of this video, welcome to Imagine with Max, the speed paint segment where my friends and I talk about different stories and ideas that we've written over the years while I make them into cool works of art. Today, I'm gonna be revisiting a story concept that we made last year where we turned our lady OCs into an original group of magical girls who came back from the dead. If you'd like to see the first video that we did, or others like it, then you can check out my speed paint playlist and familiarize yourself with our brand of creative chaos. So, I just want to start off by saying that this whole concept started with the intention of creating these designs purely for the aesthetic. Look, drawing girls in pretty outfits is just one of my guilty pleasures, okay? I'm sorry. Anyways, this alternate universe, or AU for short, is a bit of a dark twist on the whole magical girl genre. In some cases, you have Sailor Moon and Tokyo Mew Mew, where the girls run around in cute outfits and save the world through the power of love, magic, and friendship. Then there's somewhat darker takes like Madoka Magica, where becoming a magical girl is the price you pay for having a wish granted, and if you don't keep up with your witch hunting quota, you become a witch yourself. Then there's the really dark takes like Magical Girl Site and Magical Girl Raising Project, where being an MG under no circumstances exonerates you from suffering an excruciatingly painful death at the hands of either normal people or other MGs. So I wanted to get the best of both worlds into this adaptation. So allow me to elaborate. In this universe, there are girls and women who, under certain circumstances, met a tragic death before it's their time. After they die, they wake up on this kind of cosmic bridge to the afterlife before a deity I have affectionately and lazily dubbed the Bridge Guardian. So the Bridge Guardian tells these girls, "You died horribly, and that sucks. So I'm gonna give you a choice here. Either you can go past me and move on to the afterlife where you'll be at peace, or you can resume your life on Earth, live a long, happy, healthy life until you die of old age. But the catch is, you have to serve a life sentence as a magical guardian who must defend the world from the dark forces trying to corrupt it. So what do you say?" Long story short, most of these women move on to be at peace because hearing the words serve a life sentence don't exactly sound very enticing. But there are a handful who say yes. When they're revived, they're sent back in time about 2 minutes before the point of death, give or take, and they use their newfound powers to, from any witness standpoint, miraculously survive the thing or events that killed them. So to anyone else, it looks like they had a near-death experience and just went about their day. But to the girls in question, they now get a second chance to thrive and basically serve a greater purpose. And that is where the aid of our lady OCs come in. So, in case you're new here or didn't watch the first speed paint, these 8 girls on the main stage here are Rochelle, Cassie, Mari, Antia, Iria, Akane, Saoirse, and Hazel. Saoirse and Hazel are 2 members of the core 4, our nearest and dearest OCs, but now they get to thrive in an all-girl setting for once. So, every story here needs a setting. In this case, Ray and Twilight opted to create a fictional place called Peony City, just to really channel that urban pastel aesthetic. Hey, I mean, if it's a magical girl story, it's gotta feel like the place for it, right? Most of the time, the MG in pink serves as the team leader and the head runner for these kinds of stories. And while tradition dictates that the girl is normally kind, bubbly, or soft, we decided to instead make her the bad bitch, the queen bee, the devil in Prada, you get it. And that would be Rochelle. You may have seen Rochelle previously in the Ruby Redesign Part 2 speed paint as Emmy Scarborough, a member of Team Curse, but now she gets to take the center stage. So there's a few important details to note about this universe. These girls' magical girl designs, in addition to being very monochromatic, typically call back in some way, shape, or form to the manner in which they originally died. That, and they also get one special ability, which alludes to the same thing. Like in Rochelle's case, she was poisoned, right? Well, upon dying, she distinctly remembered either seeing or smelling roses in the room around her, which is why she has this very pretty floral theme to her. Her weapon is a vine whip that's so strong it can make a dent in normal objects, and her special ability allows her to secrete poison from her skin, typically from her hands or her lips. Fittingly, she goes by the name Rose here, so you get the idea, but as a quick refresher, I'm just gonna speed through the other girls real quick. Cassie, for one, was killed in a fiery car crash, so she came back looking like a campfire with a flamethrower type weapon, and the ability to burn a hole through anything. Or, more elegantly put, to create an emergency exit anywhere she is. Ironically, Cassie takes up the mantle of Ember. Mari was a dancer who, in a very cliche fashion, was killed by a falling stage light, so she came back with a golden ballerina ensemble and magic shoes that allow her to walk on water as if it were solid. Because of her French heritage, Mari's MG name is Soleil, which means sun. Iria was actually the very first of these 8 girls to die and come back, so she was a sickly child and thus more susceptible to the cold, right? So TLDR, she fell asleep in the snow and died of hypothermia. She came back with a light blue crystalline, almost Elsa-like motive, and a clear sword that allows her to use her ability, which I've dubbed Clarity. Simply put, it can cut through or cancel out other magical girls' abilities. Very handy stuff. Antia, on the other hand, carried the guilt of almost letting her sister die because, again, she was led to believe Iria miraculously survived her cold winter's nap and became very protective of her throughout their lives. So by the time they were in their 20s, maybe early 30s, they were out on a nature hike or something. Essentially, Antia jumped in to take the brunt of a wild animal attack that she didn't know Iria could have fended off on her own, but did wind up killing herself instead. So Antia was revived decked out in green with a big round shield that she effectively uses to bludgeon her enemies with. I'm assuming by that logic she can also summon a protective barrier around her and her allies, kind of like a dome. I'll have to ask why later, but let's assume that that's the case. Antia's nature theme effectively dubbed her MG form Gaia, and because of Iria's icy aesthetic, she goes by Freya. Okay, from my perspective, I think I can safely say that Akane experienced the saddest but most peaceful death in this universe. As Twi has mentioned before, Akane suffers from hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which is a heart condition where the walls of the heart are too thick and can't pump blood very well. Long story short, she died of a heart attack and was cured of her ailments upon her revival. Her outfit is heavily reminiscent of an angel, and she wields a Katakei's staff because, unlike the other 7 girls, she acts as a support unit rather than anything defense or offense. Because of Akane's circumstances surrounding her death, she was blessed with the ability to heal all wounds and illnesses, leading the people of Peony City to believe there is a literal angel flying around curing the sick and wounded. And as for her alter ego name, because Akane is inherently Japanese, she chose the name Kanon, which translates to mercy or compassion. In hindsight, Akane's abilities would be a quick fix if for some reason any of the girls were on the verge of being off the second time around. Saoirse was struck by lightning. It's that simple. So she was revived in ultraviolet colors and fights with a big-ass pair of gauntlets a la Garnet from Steven Universe. Because of the cause of death, her ability allows her to absorb electricity and use it to charge her attacks. Saoirse, wanting a name that made as big an impact as her powers, chose the name Jupiter. And as for Hazel, she was caught in a situation she wasn't meant to be tangled in, and as a result was stabbed and died from blood loss. Unlike the other 7 girls, she agreed to come back under the pretense that she'd use her powers to protect the people of Earth. But in reality, she came back to seek revenge on the people who killed her. Because she came back dressed all in red, she gained the ability to act as a bloodhound and track down other people, magical girl or otherwise, as long as she has a sample of their blood. And her weapon is a gigantic scissor blade, because sad to say, that would be the instrument of her demise. Also, as a little side note here, Kill la Kill is actually one of my favorite anime overall, and I wanted an excuse to incorporate the signature weapon into this design somehow as a nice little homage, you know? Hazel, not wanting to sound too edgy in her MG form, decided to go by Ruby. It's pretty and mildly threatening. As a final note or two, there are 2 big plot points that prevent the girls from misusing their powers or force them to take caution if they choose to reveal their identities. Number 1. Every magical girl, good or bad, has a 3 strikes rule enforced on them. If 3 people die because of their powers, or if they were used for bad intentions, the magical girl immediately dies on the 3rd strike. No chance of redemption, no crossing the bridge to the afterlife, she ain't coming back. On the bright side, there is a way to undo those first 2 strikes. For every 1 life that's taken because of their magic or their actions, they must complete 100 acts of kindness. It doesn't really sound too hard at first, but considering what position somebody like Hazel currently finds herself in, having chosen resurrection to enact revenge on her killers, turning over a new leaf would not be easy. Number 2. These girls are technically not immortal. I mean, their MG forms are invincible to an extent, but there is a way to end another MG's life without having to break the 3 strikes rule. If the MG is killed by the same means that she originally died, then she's gone. Which would make it very hard to kill some girls, i.e. the possibility of Saoirse getting struck by lightning and dying are very slim. Or for girls like Hazel, it would be very easy to stab her with a pair of scissors and have her bleed out again. Sad to say, but it is true. Also, something my friends and I really like to do is give these alternate universe like their own names, so we can be like, hey, did you see the thing that I wrote in so-and-so the other day? Or I edited part of the story in blah blah blah, would you mind taking a look? So, for the name of this universe per se, I have dubbed it Take 2. You know, kind of like Take 2 Action. Stuff like that. You know something that just occurred to me? We never really gave this team of magical girls like a proper name per se for their whole team. Kind of like how in some animes you have like the Sailor Scouts, the Mew Mews, the Precure Girls. Considering this is a universe where it's like they get a chance to change their fates per se, and there are 8 of them in a singular team, I think something like the Fateful 8 would actually be pretty catchy. Yeah. Actually, that's kind of clever. But I think that they would only agree that it applies to their specific team. It'd just be like an individual catchy thing, you know, just like solidify the fact that they're all a team now. So, yeah. That's fun. Okay, now for the fun part. I'm assuming by the video title that you guys already know what I'm getting at, right? The villain group in this universe is a magical girl mafia. as in organized crime, as in a bunch of magical girls of varying power levels working under the iron fist of one ultra-strong magical girl who, believe it or not, is actually the OG MG here. The woman in question is actually one of my beloved neutral evil characters who I have yet to introduce, so I am doing it now. This is Layla Singh. You may have heard of her previously in the Core 4 video where I described her as the villain character in The Last of Us AU. She's a very intelligent, cool, and calculated type of character who will manipulate the people around her by any means in order to achieve her greater goals. That aside, she also vouches for personal empowerment and wants to uphold the belief that everyone, regardless of their ethnicity, gender identity, or orientation, is deserving of respect. Her nationality is South Asian, and she identifies as a lesbian. Okay, back to the story. Layla was actually the Peony City police chief back in the 70s who had to throw her corrupt co-workers under the bus to climb the ranks. Her position back then is the catalyst that led to the city's current day inclusivity policies, which is why this is a universe where being LGBTQ is completely normal. Thank God, right? But as to how she became an MG, her fired coworkers eventually found out their lives going to shit was her fault, so they gunned her down in a back alley. So she met the Bridge Guardian, became a magical girl, and protected the people of Peony City for a good 10 years. Alright, so this is where it gets interesting. So Layla's resurrection back then was the reason the 3 strikes rule had to be implemented in the first place, and why the Bridge Guardian's been recruiting all these new magical girls as of late. So Layla's alter ego name used to be Sterling. Her weapon is currently a machine gun, and fittingly, her ability gives her an unlimited number of bullets to fire at her disposal. It can't kill, because no other MG was gunned down, but man, does it hurt like a bitch. Or so I like to believe. Over time, Layla realized that being a guardian against just the dark forces wasn't going to be enough to eradicate injustice overall. So she used her powers to become a vigilante of sorts and gun down the people she thought were undeserving to walk the earth. And on top of that, being the original, aka the prototype MG, she had not just 1, but 2 abilities. The Bridge Guardian originally tasked her with reviving and recruiting others like her to fight by her side. Sadly, the Guardian had to stand on the cosmic bridge and watch her recruit what was basically an entire army of magical girls who did some shady stuff during their first runs. I won't go too into detail on some of the people working beneath her, but just know that they committed atrocities ranging from robbery to drug dealing, abuse, assault, and God knows what else. Seriously, this MG Mafia has got some fucked up characters in it. With her alliances shifting, Layla's magical girl aesthetic changed itself to fit her motivations and true nature. Now she goes by Arachne, the leader of the magical girl Mafia, known accordingly as Magia Web. Now, remember how I told you that Layla can revive her own henchmen? Well, sometimes if she needs a woman who can wield some seriously powerful magic, she needs to harvest the energy of another powerful magical girl. And that other magical girl is one of my newer characters I also haven't introduced yet. This is Videl. In most settings, she just turned 30 and has this air of, your way sucks, I'm doing this thing myself. She's a very self-sufficient, take-charge type of character who refuses to let others help her when she knows that she can do it on her own. But that does not make her heartless. In fact, despite outward appearances, Videl actually has the biggest heart out of all these magical girls on this roster. As for how she fits into all of this, her cause of death isn't totally unlike Antia's actually. Similarly, she was also in the woods, but Videl was caught up in a bad thunderstorm and trapped under a fallen tree. By the time help arrived, she had been alone for days already and had passed away. So upon her return, she adopted this floaty, nature-like aesthetic and a pair of axes to chop her way through stuff. Her ability, by the way, easily one of the strongest here. She can control plants and trees a la Poison Ivy to fight with her. I guess in this case, her role is similar to the Secrets and Magical Girl that you'd see in most mainstream shows. Also, because of the environment she died in, which was under a tree surrounded by snowdrop flowers, she took up the name Snowdrop as her alter ego. So back to what I was saying. So Layla wants Snowdrop's vast energy source to summon yet another magical girl who is arguably the most powerful of any in this universe. Sad to say, it is not for good reason. Okay, as tempted as I am to unveil the identity of this third otherwise unrevealed OC, I'm gonna save her for another episode of Imagine with Max because that video will explore her universe of origin, which I will clue you in right now happens to be less magical and more post-apocalyptic in nature. There may also be kaiju involved, but that's a whole thing there, so we'll save that for another time. Okay, so I said that the whole villain group here is like a magical girl mafia, and I really had to give this some thought because as far as I've seen, nobody else has really touched upon this kind of concept yet. Anyways, Arachne being the head of Magia Web, obviously, like, because she was kind of screwed over by her coworkers, the police department, basically the whole criminal justice system in the city, she feels like the only way to gain any semblance of control and or order is to take control herself. Therefore, she's kind of established this whole organization to do what the police pretty much can't do, not to mention with a whole army of invincible magical girls else beneath her. There's basically nothing that can stop them unless it's like another magical girl, you know? Yeah, this whole thing like entails organized crime, embezzling, smuggling, hit jobs. Arachne being the very first magical girl meant that like the 3 strikes rule hadn't been made yet, and she is therefore the only one who's exempt from that rule. She can still revive other magical girls, it's just that from here on out, basically the Bridge Guardian can't really do much about Arachne, so the only thing that it can do is impose the 3 strikes rule to make sure that nothing totally gets out of hand, you know? The last means of actually restoring order to the whole magical girl hierarchy, the law of cycles, whatever you want to call it, I honestly don't know. But Layla is kind of using this to her advantage, because she basically tells these girls that she's reviving, like, if you want another chance at life, I can give you that chance, but the deal is you have to work for me and do everything I say. So obviously these girls get to live, and they are very indebted to her because she gave them their lives back. The thing is, Arachne did not tell them that they have the 3 strikes rule. That is the one piece of information she's keeping from all of them. So by the time they go out to do any of their jobs, misuse their powers, on the 3rd strike, they basically find out the hard way that Arachne lied to them and used them as an expendable tool per se. Except for this one ultra powerful girl that she needed Videl's power to revive in the first place, but that's a whole other thing there. That's gonna be actually kind of interesting if and or when I do a part 2 for this, but I just think it's a really cool concept, you know? Just to actually organize the whole magical girl hierarchy on a more technical level, you know? Kind of like how with Ghost in the Shell, despite the fact that it is more cyberpunk in nature, they still try to make it seem as believable or as practical as possible. So that's kind of what I wanted to do with this whole thing. I mean, practical is kind of a reach because they're all so magical, you know, to an extent and everything, but you get what I'm going for here. Oh, wow, I still have like 3.5 minutes, don't I? Okay, what else can I say to fill the time, I wonder? I think, technically speaking, like in terms of weapon designs and everything, no girl in this universe has a wand or a staff, like, you know, the ultra sparkly kind with a ribbon around it. You know why? Because that would be too fucking easy. Unless like one of them choked on a literal tube of glitter or some shit, I can safely say that none of them are gonna have anything like that. Trust me on that. But it is really like a nice way to test myself in terms of like weapon designs and everything, how to make something that would otherwise be super threatening, like an RPG or a scythe or one of those like mezzaluna knives that you'd see in like cooking and stuff that kind of resembles a guillotine. Like, I want to figure out a way to make those look like more sparkly or shiny rather than like super deadly, because that is kind of the primary aesthetic going on in this universe, you know? It's a nice way to like test myself in terms of design and everything. Yeah, looking back on it, I want to say that like, when Layla was resurrected back in the 70s or the 80s, and then like after switching sides, cutting off the Bridge Guardian and becoming Arachne, like somewhere in the mid 80s, maybe early 90s, like it's not the case that these 10 girls are the only ones who have been revived per se, or 10 or 11, whichever. It's the fact that this has been going on for a while, and because Layla sees them all as expendable in a nutshell, pretty much there have been dozens, if not hundreds of other girls who were revived before them, and which means that there is a lot, and I mean a lot of room to like experiment with designs and powers and backstories and causes of death and everything, because believe it or not, there are some really stupid ways to die if you think about it. I mean, they've made a song about that, they've made, I think, an MTV show about that. What I have like created here is just the very bare minimum of ways to die in a nutshell. Like there are so many different ways to go out per se that could be translated into like powers and weapons. I mean, because I haven't even covered stuff like decapitation, getting buried alive, dying in an earthquake, or what else? Getting impaled for that matter. Like I said, there's a lot of different ways to go about this. Some of those weapons might actually be pretty cool. Like, could you imagine a super shiny, like, RPG or a scythe? One of those, like, knives that kind of looks like a guillotine, but really, it's close to one, but it really isn't. I'm just saying there's a lot of opportunity here, and I'm really excited to kind of just figure that out in my head and just kind of see where it goes, you know? That's gonna be a lot of fun. But I do love the fact that this has like a much darker take than like most magical girl anime out there, because it's fine to like wear a cute outfit and save the world and have your normal emotional grace, but I like the thing where the girls have to like suffer per se to try and get to an end goal, and not like suffer, like go through literal hell and back, just like really kind of like stretch the limits of what they can handle physically, psychologically. I liked the idea of a magical girl series that would test its limits. I'm gonna be real with you, I have thought so many times about making this into a webtoon of its own or something like that, but honestly, who has the time or the patience? Me, my ADD-riddled brain, I wouldn't make it more than 3 chapters in, I guarantee that. Like, I literally couldn't do it without some help, but I'm not saying that I want to make this into a webtoon. It's nice to think about in theory, but I got other things to do that I'm more passionate about, so it is really fun to fantasize about this, though. Well, I think I've finally given my 2 cents on this whole universe that my friends and I came up with, so I am going to leave this speed paints here. I am in love with the way this poster looks, although it was kind of a pain in the ass. It took a lot longer than I thought it would. I mean, the lantern itself took me like 6 hours because I'm meticulous as fuck and I just want it to be as close to perfect as possible. Still not quite there, but I'm still really happy with how this thing looks. So I don't really know if we have enough information to warrant a part 2 video kind of thing where I talk about more things, maybe side stories. I honestly don't know, but that could always change in like maybe a week or a month or I don't know, a year from now. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But if you made it to the end of the video, congratulations! You got a cookie. Yeah, so thanks for sticking around, and I guess I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye-bye!